these things are supposed to have killed people. Lake Chany in southern Siberia, big lake, 50 miles long, 50 miles wide, but not very deep. But there's something there that in the last 14 years or so has killed about 19 people. People say, witnesses say it rams boats and knocks people into the water and grabs them and eats them.
So the one thing I've noticed about you the last time I saw you, you had one of these goatees.
Yes, well, during lockdown there was no barbers open and it was getting a bit scratchy and long and untidy, so I shaved it all off myself.
Right.
And then everybody said it took years off me, so I left it like that.
They're not telling fibs. You actually do look a lot younger than last time I saw you. So in fact, I think the last time we spoke, I just saw actually when I hit, because I loaded up Skype, I had that ring in the background. The last time we had that conversation was the 8th of December 2019. So that was the last time we spoke.
What were we speaking about back then?
I think we were talking about the Almasty, and then we were talking about Mongolia.
Oh.
How did what happened with that? I think you were talking about what was it? It was the Mongolian trip you had.
And, Mongolian deathworm, yeah.
No, not the deathworm. No, you were talking about the Almasty, that you'd been over there.
No, that was in Russia.
Oh, was it? Okay, sorry.
That was in the Caucasus Mountains in Russia.
That's my mistake. Man, so how have you been keeping?
All right. I mean, I was supposed to have been going back to Mongolia this year to hunt the deathworm again with a TV company from the States, but that's been put on hold till next year, so I hope it still comes through. There's talk of going for a second trip to Tajikistan.
Okay.
To hunt relic hominins called the ghoul, but that's also fallen through. Most recently, I made a documentary about the Almasty with the Discovery Travel Channel, but they couldn't go to Russia because of COVID, so they filmed my sections in some caves in Dorset.
Well, did they make out there with the caves in Russia?
Well, they didn't actually say that, but they look, you know, a cave is a cave, I suppose. And it's where they filmed Destiny of the Daleks in 1979.
Oh man, so that ties into the whole Doctor Who thing we were talking about the other day.
Yeah.
Man, so how long ago did that happen? I mean, I guess these things must...
That was a few weeks ago, but it was a whole day shoot. And I talked about the various cases where the Russian military have had run-ins with them in the 20s, 30s and 40s. And then some more recent cases and the stuff I discovered when I was over there, the people I talked to.
Oh man, so when was it you last went over to Russia?
Oh God, that would have been 2017.
Okay. And you were itching to get back in the saddle and ride back into the backwaters of Russia. I know I would be.
Well, where we went initially, when we first went to Russia in 2000, and I think it was 2008, we first went to Russia. There were a lot of recent sightings of the creature in this area. But now, when we went back to it, it's been very much developed. The susliks, which are sort of prairie dog type rodents that are supposed to form a fair bit of its diet, they had all died out. And there were no new sightings. I mean, we talked to people who had seen them years ago, and people who had confirmed other people's sightings from back in 2008, but no new sightings at all. So we'd have to go to a different area if we went back again.
I guess is that just due to overdevelopment? Do you think that's hunting? Do you think that's their natural diet just gone off?
I think it's a mixture of the suslik die-off and too much human disturbance.
But how often do you think that's happening to creatures that are just on the cusp of being found again, only for humans just to plow through and destroy like the local ecosystem?
Probably all over the world. In Sumatra, Well, I look for the orang pendek. Every year I go back and there's more, coffee plantations and palm oil plantations.
So I guess that's their country's their economic basis, right?
Yeah.
It's terrible, really, because I guess we're like a species with amnesia, as like Graham Hancock likes to say, and these things are just so close to us, and we're just so destructive, aren't we, as a species?
That's why it's important that these things are found, so the eyes of the world are then focused on that area. If I could prove orang pendek existed, everyone would be looking at, Kerinci National Park and other areas in Sumatra. And if we can preserve them, then you don't just preserve orang pendek, you preserve the Sumatran rhino, the Sumatran tiger, the Sumatran subspecies of the Indian elephant, and loads more creatures.
Would it end up in a situation a bit like the conservation parks of Africa, where you have almost legal hunting in order to provide enough money to provide for the park, as it were, to pay for those people? Is that what would happen if we were to find these creatures, or do you think they will be protected or they get taken to a zoo around the world, kind of thing?
Well, hopefully neither of those things. I hope they get protection where they are. Ecotourism is the way forward.
Sure.
I've never agreed with sport hunting. I think the people that do it are weaklings and cowards and have small willies.
Yeah, for sure. That's where all the executives go out there, don't they, and just shoot tigers and lions and stuff. So I guess like I was just saying a few minutes ago, the last time we spoke was 2019. It was the Christmas time there, and you, I think, I hadn't long come back from a trip. I know we talked about the Almasty, we talked about the orang pendek. I mean, so what has, say, the last 2 years looked like for you? What's cryptozoology been like through the COVID period?
Well, most of it's been on hiatus. I haven't really been able to do any field work, and very few people have. I mean, some people in the States who live near the areas where there are lake monster or Sasquatch reports have, been able to continue their work, but most of my stuff is done abroad in places like Asia and Australia. So I haven't been able to do much at all, to be honest. I've got a new book out, Adventures in Cryptozoology Volume 1, and Volume 2 is due out sometime in the autumn. I haven't got an exact date yet.
So what does your Volume 1 cover?
Well, originally it was written as one volume, but the publisher said it was too big, so that's why they split it in two. Volume 1 is basically, it's an introduction to cryptozoology, and it looks at the background of cryptozoology and the history of it, and it goes on to look at things like dragon legends, sea serpents, lake monsters, various types of mystery apes and hominins, such as the Yeti, the orang pendek, the Am Sasquatch, Almasty, and so forth. And some of the less well-known things like the Mongolian death worm and things like that. And then in Volume 2, it will be looking at things like the Tasmanian wolf and the creatures that are supposed to be extinct but are probably not. Giant animals like sightings of gigantic crocodiles and anacondas and things. And then it will go on to recount my own adventures in Volume 2. And then the last bit of the book is advice on how to set up your own cryptozoological expedition if you want to do it from scratch.
All right, cool. So I was going to say, is it a kind of layman's introduction, or is it more of a broad scope? And I guess you've kind of answered that there. So if someone was to take on your book, would their options be to contact you and then go, hey, can I come and join you, kind of thing? Is that kind of what you would like these people who are buying your book?
It's encouraging people to do their own expeditions. So I break it down, bit by bit. Like I had the importance of getting guides, getting the correct inoculations, doing ground research, so you maximize your time in the field and things like that. So it's about setting up your own expedition. the more people we get doing this competently, the more chance there is that someone's going to turn something up.
Absolutely. I think that's the most important thing, because the more eyes there is in the field, the better. So I guess that's what we need, don't we? Need more people in the field, more people actually touching the ground, as it were, and more, teams out there, trying to find what is out there, because I guess they is our biggest question, isn't it? What is out in the woods? What is out in the deserts and so on? So with you, so I can remember that you were talking a lot about your health conditions the last time I spoke to you. How have they improved?
Oh, well, I suffer intermittently from gout.
That's what I can remember you saying. You said you felt that you were getting Victorian health conditions.
Yeah, gout and consumption. Yes, I have. Yeah, but I sort that out with a tablet called colchicine, which sorts it out within a couple of days. Thankfully, I've never had it. Whilst I've been on an expedition. Yeah, I'm an asthmatic, but I'm not a bad one. I carry inhalers with me, but I seldom have to use them.
So my mother and my son are asthmatic. It appears to have jumped me. I've just been spent 3 weeks in the hospital due to COVID.
And I've been following your nightmarish experiences online.
Dude, it hasn't been good. Today I was the first time I've actually been out beyond the city, or kind of in the city really, and just getting about, and even that was pretty exhausting. Yeah, I had to wear this like secure mask around my face. They were going to sedate me. They wanted to kind of like suck out some stuff from my lungs while I was out. They thought the best option for me was to be sedated, to lay on my chest, and basically just ride it out. But they didn't do that. They put what's called a PEPT mask on me. Like I said, it was literally like chained around my head. Two people had to put that on. It was literally it was pushing 95% oxygen into my lungs, and that was just the strangest experience for like 23 hours a day, and that was exhausting because your lungs are forced to the air is forced into your mouth, so your lungs are expanding constantly, even though you're breathing out, and that was just the strangest thing. And then so I was in ICU, then I moved to critical care, then I went onto a respiratory ward, and I was on that ward for about a week or so, bringing my oxygen levels. Because what happened is the week I'd had a test, I was here, so I'd spent most of that week off work, and then my GP recommended that I track my blood oxygen level and my heart rate 3 times a day, like after meals kind of thing. And on one of those, I think it was the Friday, my blood oxygen level was at 58. So I'd rang 111. I'd gone, hey, this is the situation. And when the paramedic came in and says, had that hit 45, you'd have been gone. And I was like, what? And for a guy who's never ever been to hospital, never had a health condition that needed kind of medical intervention, it was a weird experience just to have all that intensity all around me. I'd never had anything like that before.
Had you been jabbed prior to that or not?
I had not. No, I was cautious about taking it. There's a lot of feedback about the people who are having the vaccines. My neighbor downstairs has lost control of her arm. There's a guy I know who's now permanently, he can't walk. So I was really, what's the word for it? Not comfortable with taking the vaccine until enough people had. I was just kind of wait it out and see what happened with more people, with the yellow card system and what was being reported. So I hadn't had it. But where I work, I generally don't work with that many people. I'm a warehouse manager with a UK supermarket. So I spend most of my time away from people. So generally wasn't having interactions with many people. I didn't really have to wear a mask where I was. So I was kind of in a bit of a bubble there as well. So I didn't do it. Had I known what I was going to go through, I think I would reconsider.
I was double jabbed fairly early on, because when I'm not hunting monsters, I work for the NHS.
Right.
I had absolutely no side effects whatsoever.
Oh, good. I mean, that's something I need to do. So right now, the doctor I had there was telling me, so I have T-cell immunity. He said that could last. There's no recording of how long they last, but he said he can expect it to last up to a year. But so within the next 8 to 16 weeks, make sure you get the vaccine, or one of them at least, and go from there.
A friend of mine was double jabbed, and he went to a concert. He got it, and he was down for about a fortnight with it.
Oh man!
He didn't have to go to hospital, but him and his wife were. It knocked them about a bit.
Yeah, I mean, it appears to affect people in different ways, which is really unusual for a virus in the way that it's affecting people. Some people, it's just a cough and a sneeze, and it's all done. I was listening to the Joe Rogan show the other day. He had it for a day, but then again, he had 10,000 cc's of vitamin C, he said, and then the next day he was gone. So I kind of wonder if you've got the access to medication, or you can look after yourself. You have more of a fighting chance to deal with it quicker. And some people, it affects long term, like this whole long COVID thing. There's a lady at work who hasn't had a taste now for about a year. My taste is not even affected. I can't taste things that are really sweet anymore, and some things taste more sour than they should. But apart from that, I can taste okay.
Oh God, not being able to taste sweet, that would be a nightmare for me.
Yeah.
I'm a complete sugar addict.
So yeah, when I came out of hospital, I kind of joked that I really wanted a pizza. So I had a pizza, and I had a bottle of Pepsi that came with it. I couldn't taste the Pepsi at all. But that was the first thing I couldn't taste, how sweet it was. And I drink Pepsi pretty often, so I was just like, I just can't taste it. This tastes really, yeah. So, but I don't know. I think it's coming back. I think it's a little bit more potent than it was. So I have to say that it clearly is a recovery for me, but for some people, not at all. Can't imagine not tasting anything permanently. That's got to be awful. I mean, imagine what your favorite food is, and then you realizing that you can't eat it anymore. Well, you could, but you can't taste it. Strange. I mean, so I guess how's it really affected you? So you say you can't get out in the field. So is it because you had plans to go around the world, but the travel restrictions were the problem? Was that the main problem?
Yes, the travel restrictions are the problem. So I'm hoping it's going to be lifted by next year.
I was going to say, how are they looking now? I mean, so what is the traffic? What is the conditions on travel now for the places you want to get to? Have you been watching them?
Well, I haven't looked in the past few weeks. The last time I looked, Mongolia was amber.
So how much would that actually cost as a trip to go to there? Would you need like a whole team to come with you as well?
Well, I was going to go with a TV company on this one. They were footing the bill. It was for a documentary, which hopefully is still going to happen.
So I guess for them, it's just a case of just kicking the can down the lane, isn't it, for when things are lifted? So you said that was with the Travel Channel?
No, that was an independent American company that got some backing. So they're making a big documentary about cryptozoology, and hopefully it will still come off.
Yeah, because I see the Travel Channel has replaced the History 2 channel in the US, hasn't it? Which used to be the channel that did all the ancient alien stuff and monster.
When I was making the Almasty documentary for the Travel Channel, the director there says that the Travel Channel has gone bonkers on cryptozoology because they're finding that's what brings in the viewers.
Yeah.
So fingers crossed, I get a lot of work out of the Travel Channel.
Absolutely, because like if there's a channel dedicated to that, and I guess having it as a broad termed name like Travel means as a production house they can do a lot more content. As whether with history, I guess you can't, because you're restricted to talking only about what was as opposed to what is, just by the name alone. So I think that should certainly open a lot more avenues for work for you and get some more people eyes on shows.
Well, fingers crossed. I mean, they want to do one on lake monsters. I know, so I've sold them the story. I've told them all about the Russian lake monsters, the 3 lakes in Siberia,
Okay.
where these things are supposed to have killed people. Lake Chany in southern Siberia, big lake, 50 miles long, 50 miles wide, but not very deep. But there's something there that in the last 14 years or so has killed about 19 people. People say, witnesses say it rams boats and knocks people into the water and grabs them and eats them.
Yes, so psychologically that's a bit different, isn't it? Because that appears to be an aggressive.
Yeah, well, they said there's one guy said he was fishing with his friend when this thing described as serpentine and about 30 feet long rams the boat, flips it over, and it grabs his mate, and he makes it to the shore, but he never sees his friend again. Another witness was an old woman who saw her grandson, who was a soldier, he's aged 23, on a boat fishing in the lake. Once again, the creature rams the boat, grabs him, never seen again. And they've asked for an official government investigation, and the government says, oh, people are just getting drunk and drowning.
Well, that's interesting.
Bits of them have been washed up that have been chewed by something. So it's a kind of getting drunk and drowning that bites chunks out of you.
Yeah.
Sounds like the plot to a horror novel.
It certainly does. I mean, so what do you think that would be, as in like a species? What kind of creature would you expect that to perhaps?
Well, sturgeon can get up to 23 feet long, the beluga sturgeon, but they're not aggressive and they're not known for eating people. They're bottom feeders. So unless it was a fantastically big and aggressive sturgeon, and it wouldn't be a sturgeon, it could be some form of huge eel, or it could be something completely unknown to science. But there are other lakes in eastern Siberia, Lake Labanika and Lake Vorota, where there are similar stories. In Lake Labanika, the nomads say, because in Lake Chany, there's, towns and villages around it, but Lake Labanika is totally isolated, but nomads make camps there, and they say they've had rafts overturned by something that grabs people. They say that deer pursued into the lake are grabbed by this huge creature. Moscow University caught something massive on sonar there a couple of years ago when they visited there. But there's never been a proper investigation, since the 1950s. People in the 1950s from Moscow University saw creatures there that they said had broad heads and broad backs with dorsal fins. And then the other lake, Lake Vorota, very similar stories and description. But there were 2 scientists there that were on a dead tree that went out into the lake, and they saw something moving with light patches, and they realized they were eyes, and they were the eyes of this thing that seemed to be stalking them in the water. Some sort of huge fish, which they couldn't identify, but it was absolutely enormous, and they scarpered off this dead tree. So this was back in the 50s. But there's never been a dedicated, proper, long-term expedition to any of these lakes. And I would like to get out there and investigate all 3 with underwater cameras and baiting and camera traps left trained on carcasses at the water's edge, talking to witnesses and trying to work out what's going on there.
Yeah, because I guess if it is getting close to the edge to take bait, and it is taking meat, as it were, I guess it would be relatively easy to get a reaction from that if it's in, Pacific area.
So you could have underwater cameras with bait. You could have ones on the edge of the lake as well.
Yes. Do you think it comes shallower at the sides? Is that still how this particular?
Lake Chany is fairly shallow altogether. It only goes down to about 23 feet.
Okay.
So it should be easy to attract something.
Yeah, because that's obviously the issue with obviously Loch Ness, isn't it? It's deep all the way and it's all murky water. So as well with something like that, that sounds like it could yield much more positive results and a quicker time round. But do you think it's because it's isolated? Do you think that's the reason why it hasn't been investigated?
Oh yes, yeah. That's the main reason, they're isolated. Another thing I'd like to do is to get buoys and have bait underneath them attached with rope. So if anything grabs the bait and pulls hard enough, pulls the buoy underwater, you know, there's something bigger and stronger in that lake than anything recorded.
Yeah, I guess there is only a limited amount of things to do, and I guess if it's an animal, it's going to be just following for meals, isn't it? So I guess it's just a case of get the cameras out there and see what it is. I mean, it's still amazing what it could be, and I guess what it could be is it still ticks into that Loch Ness. It could be a remnant of a dinosaur, perhaps, or a plesiosaur. Do you think that could still be the case in those lakes?
No, no, zero chances of that. There is nothing in the fossil record that suggests that plesiosaurs survived the KT extinction event. They were saltwater rather than freshwater. They needed warm water. They were reptiles, so they needed a warm water, not cold Siberian lakes. They were air breathers, so you would see them surfacing more often. If you watched a lake with plesiosaurs in it for any length of time, you'd see them breaching to breathe. So they're a non-starter. More likely to be Elvis Presley in a rubber suit than it is to a plesiosaur.
Oh man, could be the Sea Devils, you know. You know, I think the Sea Devils might have been the first serial of Doctor Who I actually watched in its entirety when I was a kid.
The bit I remember is where one of them is burning through a door with its gun and it sticks its claw round.
Yeah,
Web claw comes from it. It's still one of my favourites.
absolutely.
Thank God they haven't been brought back by the modern travesty and bastardised in the way the Silurians were.
It is surprising how they haven't dipped into the lesser characters of the older series, apart from the Daleks, the Cybermen, etc. They haven't played with the rest of them. Like you said, your fear there is well justified with what they've done in more modern Doctor Who.
Well, I stopped watching as soon as Jodie Whittaker was cast. That was it for me. I stopped watching Doctor Who and I stopped watching the BBC, and I no longer pay my licence fee. And I wrote to them and told them why. 60% of viewers have been driven away now by the stupid gender flip Doctor and the woke scenarios. White straight male is bad narrative. Well, that's your biggest demographic you've just driven away.
It's crazy, isn't it? And you're finding that across all heroes and science fiction in general. That is the push, and it's like
belittle Luke Skywalker to give power to some new female character.
Yeah, I'm all good with female characters in general, but as long as they have a reason.
Yeah, so am I. If they'd have done a spin-off series with Romana, I would have been fine with that.
Absolutely. It's like, give me a reason.
If they do it because they want to take things away. That's what the woke and the PC they do. They like to take everything and control everything. And if you're not part of their vile little narrative, then they'll try and cancel you. And it's time we woke up and smelt the coffee on this.
So on that note, then, so what do you think about James Bond change into a woman at the end of this new Bond movie? What's about to be released?
I haven't seen it yet. No, but the whole concept is ridiculous. I mean, I haven't liked the new James Bonds. They take themselves way too seriously. The best James Bond to me was Roger Moore.
Yeah, so
I liked it.
A bit light-hearted.
Well, I like the sort of comic book style shenanigans and mad villains with outlandish plots for world domination. I mean, you could argue that the new guy, what's his name?
Daniel Craig.
Yeah, he's the closest to the actual books, because in the books he's not a suave lady killer. He's just a psychopath. He's just a nutcase with a gun.
That's exactly what MI6 recruits. They want assassins, effectively, who are smart, and I guess that's what James Bond really is.
But all these franchises are dying. The Marvel Cinematic Universe is dying. DC films are dying. And Doctor Who is effectively dead. Star Trek, Star Wars, they're all dying because they keep pushing the woke narrative and then doubling down on it.
Sure.
When fans complain.
Yeah, because
that's what you get when you put ideologues in charge of something. You can't have ideologues in charge of things.
No, that they want to push their ideas. It's like we are the new bosses, so we're now going to do what we want to do, regardless of the fan base and regardless of any past history. That's gone. This is our story now, or it's our platform, and that's the phrase I really hate. They're using that platform to push their narrative. And I'm like, I don't care what color you are, what race you are, what gender you are. Give me a reason to care, and I'll watch. But doing it for the sake of doing it, just to, I don't know, kind of stab the fan base and wave a finger at them. It just seems to be, well, that fan base is just going to go find something else to play with. Well, I don't know what's left. It's a strange one.
Privately done things, independently done stuff. That's the
Yeah.
way to go.
It is. I mean,
same with comic books. I used to be a huge comic book collector. I had a massive Batman collection going back to 1963. I had thousands of these, and I stopped reading Batman about 10 years ago when Kevin Smith was writing it, because he wrote this graphic novel called Cacophony, and it was the worst thing I'd ever read. And it was like he didn't understand any of the characters. He was having them say things they wouldn't say, do things they wouldn't do. And I thought, I've had enough of this. So I kept, the only one I kept was The Killing Joke, which I still think is the greatest single issue comic ever. And I sold the rest and financed a trip to Sumatra with the money. But looking at comics now, I'm glad that I bailed when I did, because they've just got worse and worse and worse, and more woke and woke and woke.
Yeah, I haven't bought a comic myself for quite some while. I'll buy the occasional kind of annual or compendium of stories of graphic novels. But I kind of buying them a bit at random, nothing specific. Not really buying them for the artist or the story. Just kind of going into my local Forbidden Planet and going, "Oh, this looks interesting."
I kid you not. This is a real thing. DC did a graphic novel called, and it's been panned, and it was a disaster. They did a graphic novel called Gotham High, about Selena Kyle, Catwoman,
Yeah.
at high school, being in a love triangle with a young Bruce Wayne and Jack Napier, the Joker.
Really?
And Bruce Wayne is all he cares about is how many followers he gets on YouTube and Instagram. And Alfred is gay and Chinese just because.
Wow, I didn't know that. So when did that come out?
That came out a couple of years ago. And the same woman that did it did another graphic novel called I Am Starfire, about Starfire having a fat, ugly lesbian daughter who hates her, and is a naughty teenager, and she has to be a lesbian just because, and she has to be fat just because, and she has to be naughty just because.
She's got purple hair.
No, it's black actually, but it's a wonder she hasn't. But that again, panned. Nobody reads it. Manga is taking American comics apart.
Yeah.
Because they won't go woke.
No, because I guess the Japanese patriarchal culture almost forbids that, doesn't it? The stories are written in that way. The thing is, I watch a lot of anime, and I used to be a big fan when I was like in my early 20s and teens, and I would buy mangas at the time. But when you realize these mangas get to volume 400 and they're 10, you realize, damn, if I had to follow, say, Dragon Ball, for instance, which is incredibly popular, there's like 700 volumes, and you're going, how could I afford that? Couldn't do it.
I watched the cartoon once. I don't know if it lost something in translation, but it didn't seem to make any sense.
No, and I tell you what, so a lot of Japanese to English just doesn't make sense. I mean, I play a lot of RPGs and gaming wise. They generally follow the same formula. There's an ancient evil that's come back, and a bunch of high school kids generally have to get together, or an innocent person doesn't have any idea about it at all, will then be granted a power and ability to stop the bad guy. It generally follows a very simple formula, and it just gets transplanted into the different story. But it is generally the same story, so it gets repetitive really quickly. And it's almost a case of how do you level up and how do you power up, or how do you overcome an emotion and how do you overcome a social situation. Generally, is the difficulties in their books. But you're right. I mean, it's American comics are quiet. I mean, I know there's an issue with distribution in the US now with comic books, isn't there? Isn't it
Mm.
like the main distributor of comics has been sidelined? Disney won't send them any Marvel stuff. I think that's what I read. And in the UK, I guess I don't. Is there any comic houses in the UK anymore? So I guess we had like wasn't
2000 AD.
is that still going over here?
Still, 2000 AD still going. I mean, I stopped reading it in 1988.
So I
It's
guess
still going.
So I guess you've still. I don't even know if like the Beano and Dandy still go anymore. Or even
They're still going, yeah. Beano and Dandy are still going. There's a lot of independent comics in Britain.
Yeah. Oh, good. Because I have to say, I don't know. I probably want to have a look actually and see what's going on. So I guess there was a lot of independent houses in the US for a while. I think they started getting picked up by Marvel and DC, didn't they?
Mm. But I find Japanese folklore fascinating. I've written an encyclopedia on Japanese ghosts and monsters, which are broadly called yokai, because they're
How did you come across those stories?
I was just pootling around the internet like you do, and I was on a site looking at these comical drawings of various creatures from mythology, and I just got onto one and then started to find out more about it. Then I got interested in Japanese folklore as a whole because it's so bizarre. And then I realized there was no books written in English on Japanese monsters. So I wrote the first one, the Great Yokai Encyclopedia.
Oh,
And they have loads of things. They have giant bipedal rabbits that dig up corpses and eat their livers. They have flaming pigs that steal your genitals. They've got a whale-sized man-eating sea cucumber that grows out of girls' knickers if they're dropped into the sea. They've got, what else have they got? All sorts of really freaky things. And you just wonder, where the hell does this folklore come from? It's so utterly bizarre.
Do you think about so in the Middle East, and I was reading a book by it's going to bug me now. So he was talking about hallucinogens and how they influence religions in the Middle East, also the progenitors of those religions. Do you think, therefore, in the East they also had the same issue going on, where they were consuming psychedelics, perhaps, and that therefore they were seeing really bizarre stuff in their dreams or in their imaginations?
They don't have a tradition of it, but what Japan does have is this unique combination is that it was literate very early on. It got the printing press and writing and stuff very early on. And it's got lots of different religions. When the Chinese went over there, I think in the 3rd century, they said that the religion they had then, there was a priestess that no one ever saw that lived in a big mound-like building, and one man could confer with her and she conferred with the gods. And they think that's where the goddess of the rising sun had a genesis.
Oh.
You know, the sun goddess. But you had things like Shinto there, and there are several other native religions. There's one whose name I forget now, but it's about monks that just go out into the mountains. The name of the religion translates as to lie down in the mountains, and they just go and sit under waterfalls and meditate and stuff. And then you had Buddhism coming in. So what you get anywhere when you've got these mix of religions, you get older deities and gods become monsters and demons. You find that with Christianity. Christianity,
sure, yeah,
demonizes old gods, and it will take the holidays and the rituals of the older religion and co-opt it into theirs. In West Africa, they believe in this thing called the Ninki Nanka, which is this like serpentine dragon-like monster that's supposed to live in the swamps that they're terrified of, and they believe anything goes wrong, it's the Ninki Nanka, and it's baleful influence, and it's almost certainly a demonization of a pre-Islamic python deity, because animals like crocodiles, pythons, and other things are worshipped across Africa. And I think something similar has happened in Japan, and a lot of the old deities have become ghosts and monsters, and they've lost their meaning because it hasn't been recorded. Like there's one ghost of a woman that just stands in the rain and licks her hand, There's another creature with a horse-like head and great long arms and legs. And it just sits in abandoned buildings licking the ceiling. There's a lot of licking in Japanese folklore, Japanese monsters. So a creature that licks the filth out of badly kept public bathrooms. And there's things that come and eat your hair, creep up behind you and eat your hair and lick your hair. So licking is this motif you see again and again.
Japan, though, I mean, in video games and in comic books and in manga, there's almost a heavy influence of Christianity, despite the fact they're not really a Christian country at all. But they have the demon and the angel as high motifs in a lot of story. Everything is kind of considered to be either a good representation or a spirit that is either good or evil. And it's kind of like there's no in between either. They either are one or the other, or there are those who are assisting the other side, shall we say. So there might be an angel that's actually being influenced by a devil as the only kind of crossover. And it's remarkable how many stories feature that motif of the devil angel kind of talking and influencing people. So when you say there about cultures taking over each other, it's almost like there's a Christianity that's kind of poking it into Japan without them even realizing it.
In legend, you don't get that at all in traditional Japanese legend. The creatures themselves, although they might be dangerous and aggressive, that's just in their nature. They're not sort of working for a higher evil power.
Yeah, interesting. So I wonder how many other cultures have like that scenario going on. I mean, I couldn't begin to say about the people of, say, Argentina or Chile or Bolivia. I know nothing of their cultures over there. I feel quite bad for that. I don't know what their deity system is. I don't know what faiths they have in those countries. I'd like to go find out. I mean, what do you know of places that are a bit more off the map or off the radar?
I know I've heard it about the cryptids that live there. There is a very good book on Patagonian monsters. I think it's called The Monsters of Patagonia. It's all about the folklore of that part of South America.
Interesting. Actually, I might pick that up actually.
And there is a book that CFZ Press is about to publish that has been written by a hereditary Eagle Clan Arawak chieftain from Guyana in South America, all about the creatures and ghosts and monsters and gods of his religion.
Oh, excellent. Because I think there's so many stories that get lost because we just don't write them down.
So that's going to be out within the next couple of months.
Fantastic. That's really good to hear. So I was intrigued to learn something. I've been reading one of Graham Hancock's books about America before, talking about. I think there was a particular archaeological dig that happened in an area where the lead archaeologist decided on his own back, instead of digging to 5 feet deep, which is where they believe the Clovis culture was, he dug to 15 feet down and found there was still human remains there and human pottery and so on, thus proving there was an earlier civilization in areas of America that's pre-Clovis culture, and they just have no idea who and what they are. But he was talking about, say, the mammals, the giant mammals that existed in North America, and how many of them are. They've only just started to now find the bodies of these creatures, like these mega mammals, and because it was considered that America never had any giant mega mammals, but they clearly did in their history at some point before the Ice Age happened. I mean, so what do you think about some of those creatures that perhaps, would any of them still survive in any capacity?
Probably not in North America, but in South America, there are stories of giant ground sloths surviving in the Amazon. Not the gigantic ones that were as big as elephants, but more the sort of bear-sized ones. The medium-sized ground sloth. Mapingauri is one of the local names for it, and they say it's this great creature with huge claws, foul stench, and its hide is armored and it can't be pierced except for a small part on the belly. Well, there are the mylodontic ground sloths, which are some of these medium-sized ones. They had skin studded with knobs of bone that that made armor beneath the hair. And the only place they didn't have it was on the belly, which is a really weird coincidence.
Yeah, I can see why there would be someone who goes, "Oh, these things, do they match up?" Yes, they do. Yeah, because there was like there was giant sized. I think it was a horse that was like twice the size of a normal horse. It had a much muscular body. I thought that was actually that was one of the descriptions I read. Like I said, there was the mega sloth, the giant cats. I guess America does have some cats, doesn't it? But I think they're all mainly imported, aren't they? Isn't the mountain lion a moved species rather than a Native American? Sorry.
No, the puma is a native species, as is the jaguar.
Okay, I misunderstood that. So,
Horses evolved in North America millions of years ago, migrated into Europe and Asia and Africa, then died out in North America and were unknown there until white men brought them back.
I didn't know that actually. So, it's interesting. You always see the Native Americans just running around on horses, and that was their primary mode of transport. But if we brought them to them, it makes you wonder how they traverse such massive giant tracks without mammals and horses to support them. Because I was watching a documentary just the other day about how this Native American tribe would migrate almost 1,000 miles per season. It's like, how do you do that? I don't know. Man, so what have you got coming up then? Shall we in the future? So the next couple of years, what have you got coming up for you?
I think it's the 13th of October. Sorry, no, the 13th of November. I'll be speaking at the London Cryptozoology Club. They're having a day conference, and I'm talking. They have a talk called "Death by Cryptid," which is about the rare cases when cryptid animals are supposed to have killed people.
So I guess your up in the lake in Siberia will be a part
that
of
will be part of the Beast of Jaravan. Very rare cases where things like Sasquatch and Yeti are supposed to have killed people. Giant anacondas, giant squid, stuff like that.
Yeah, nice.
Then the last weekend in November, which is the 27th, 28th, I'll be up in Whitby talking at something called Winter Ghosts, which is part of the folk horror revival thing, and I'll be talking about dragon legends, both worldwide and in Britain, and what's behind them, and could something actually have existed in reality? That
yeah, I was up in Whitby a couple of months ago, in fact, and actually I'd never been. It's one of those places that I always wanted to go, never ever got round to it. So I was finally glad I got to Whitby and climbed the 199 steps and walked around the Abbey and so on, and took the drone out over the sea up there. Beautiful place, absolutely amazing. And I did speak to a lady there, and she actually was talking about dragons, and she said that she comes from Newcastle, and she says Newcastle has this. Well, she just was describing the bay while pointing at Whitby Bay. She says, if you could take one of those arms out there, which is where a lighthouse was at the end, it says there's one of those, but it's kind of made of land. It's in Newcastle, and it's believed that there's a dragon under that up in the Newcastle Bay. And I was like, oh, interesting. I'll keep that as a note.
That would be Marsden Bay, and the dragon is called the Shoney.
And so, do you know much about that legend? I guess.
Yes. Well, there's a pub called Marsden Grotto that's actually built into the cliff face, and you have to go down in a lift to get to it. And originally it was a cave, and that was extended by a guy called Blaster Jack in I believe the 18th century, who used gunpowder to enlarge the cave, and he made some tea rooms, and him and his wife lived very well off of this. And when he passed away, it became a pub, and the pub has gone through landlord to landlord to the present day. Now, in the sea around there, you still there, mate?
Yeah, I'm still here. I was listening.
Oh, sorry, I thought we'd lost the connection there.
No,
in the sea around the area, there was supposed to be a sea dragon called the Shoney, and when the area was under the Danelaw, so the story goes, that the Vikings went in fear of this creature attacking their longships, so they would draw lots and make a sacrifice. They would truss someone up who drew the shortest lot, slit their throat and throw them into the water in the hope that the Shoney would devour them instead of attacking the Viking longship. And after a while, this became, rather than just a means of to sating the creature, it became almost like a worship. It became a cult. And bodies would wash up around Marsden Bay and all along that coast as far as north as Lindisfarne, trussed up with their throats slit, sometimes half eaten. Now, this case has been investigated by a mate of mine called Mike Hallowell, who was a Fortean researcher and author. He's retired now. But he said that he was told that the last body washed up in Marsden Bay in 1928.
Oh, really? So actually, that puts
It's
it
just that,
the modern day almost.
yeah, they used the beer cellar in Marsden Grotto, the pub, as a place to lay out the bodies before the police came and got them. And they said they would turn up regularly in this area, and the last one was 1928, which means, if this story is on the level, that there was a dragon worship cult making human sacrifices to a sea dragon well into the 20th century. And Mike says that he had phone calls warning him off, saying, don't pursue it anymore. If you know what's good for you, just leave this story. Which makes you wonder if there's some sort of vestige of the cult still around. But Mike also said he saw the creature himself. He said he was driving with his family along the cliffs and he saw these other cars parked up and people looking out into the sea. And he said he saw the back of this huge animal come up, and it was brown with a darker stripe along the spine. And it was a big hump, and he could see the neck and tail coming off it under the water. And he said it wasn't a whale, it wasn't a dolphin, it wasn't a basking shark. And all these people were looking at it and they thought it was the Shoney.
Wow, that's quite a considerable story I've never heard of before. Thank you. No, the impression I got from what that lady was telling me, I think she was trying to tell me that the bay itself, sorry, the dragon became rock and became the line in the bay.
Oh, that's from Yorkshire.
Yeah.
That's not from Newcastle. That
I thought she said it was Newcastle, so it's possible she might have got them confused because we were obviously.
yeah. There's a row of rocks that go out into the sea in North Yorkshire, and they were supposed to have been the petrified bones of a dragon.
Ah, so it sounds like for that she's got two stories confused then.
Yeah.
But that's what always happens over the years, doesn't it? They all seem to merge and get lost with each other. So it's vital that people know what they are and they're written down. Man, so I'm just trying to consider what it must have looked like, that creature. I mean, so have you had any like close encounters yourself?
Yeah, a couple of times. The last time I was in Sumatra, I heard the orang pendek calling, and the guide said that's the orang pendek, and it was less than a mile away in the jungle. And when we followed the noise, there were footprints, and that on that particular expedition, we found footprints and handprints all over the place. But we got hair from a previous expedition that was looked at by Lars Thomas from Copenhagen University, who's an expert in mammal hair, and he said that it was an unknown primate. It was related to the Sumatran orangutan, but it wasn't the Sumatran orangutan. It was something related to it that was distinct. And in his words, he said, I was forced to conclude there's a large unknown primate in Sumatra. But even closer than that was the first time I was in Russia. I was with a couple of other guys staking out this old abandoned farmhouse. And this farmhouse had been abandoned since the early 70s, and it consisted of an L-shaped veranda running around 3 rooms, and you couldn't go from room to room. You had to go out onto the veranda via 3 different doors. And we had set up camera traps and bait to put out fruit and honey and meat. And we were staking the place out, and about 10 o'clock at night, I hear a strange twittering noise like a bird, and then the camera trap goes off. Now, witnesses I've spoken to said that the owl master makes this weird twittering noise like a bird. And I thought, blimey, is that what I think it is? Then nothing else happened. It got to about 2:30 in the morning, and the three of us went to warm ourselves around a stove in this old abandoned farm because we'd been out on the veranda. And one of my mates fell asleep on this manky old mattress. And me and this guy called Adam Davis were warming ourselves around this stove. Now, the door to this room was a few inches ajar, and there was moonlight and starlight. And from outside comes a deep guttural vocalization. And I said to my mate, "You hear that?" And he said, "Yeah." Then something walked along the veranda, and it was on two legs because when it passed the door, it blocked out the moonlight and the starlight to a height of around 7 foot. This thing was taller than the door, whatever it was. But we just saw a shape blocking out the moonlight and the starlight as it was walking along. And I said to Adam, "It's out on the veranda." And we grabbed our cameras and went running out. But we found nothing except darkness and silence. And we looked around the farm and the outbuildings, but we couldn't see anything. The bait hadn't been touched. When we checked the cameras in the morning, all we got was vegetation moving about. So was that an owl master? I don't know. It certainly wasn't a bear. A bear wouldn't have been walking on two legs, and it would have made more noise.
And the bear would, I guess, would also stay around. Is there many bears in that particular part of the world?
Oh yeah, lots of bears.
Is it possible to get them confused? I mean,
well, one guy we heard about said he was a hunter. He got what he thought was a bear in his crosshairs, and then it stood up, and he thought it was an owl mastiff. And they won't shoot owl mastiffs as a taboo against killing them because they're thought to be wildness. They're thought to be some form of human relative.
Isn't it in Russia there's a protection law for owl mastiff? Isn't that, aren't they considered to be wild humans or something? Is that right?
Well, there was a official commission. There was what they called the Snowman Commission in the 1950s, started by Boris Brezhnev and Dmitry Bayanov and Eugene Kaufman. And that, and Peter Smolin, who's the director of the Darwin Museum, and that was a government-backed thing, and they did expeditions into the Pamir Mountains and the Caucasus. And even when it was disbanded, they all still met up at the Darwin Museum and carried out their research privately. And it's just been reinstated. There's a new Snowman Commission now in Russia.
Yeah. So what does that mean? Is it if they come across those creatures, they have the same human rights? Is it something like that?
Well, that's a good question. If these things turn out to be hominins, that means members of the genus Homo, so they're relations of one of the ancestors of man, rather than great apes. Do they get human rights? How would we work that?
I don't know. So what? Because I know there was that the wolf baby child, wasn't there, in the 1950s? I think actually it was later.
Oh, that was back in the 20s. Well, there's been a number of these supposed wolf children and bear children and so on. The famous ones were, I think they were at the turn of the last century, and they were in India.
That's right, yes.
And they became quite famous. One of them died fairly early on. The other one, lived a reasonably long life, but they never learnt to speak. But it's come out since then. The whole story of them being found with wolves and being sucked by wolves is nonsense. That was put about by the guy that ran the orphanage to get money for his orphanage. They were just two mentally retarded girls.
Oh, okay.
They made this story up.
Yes, I'm sure I read a story that one of the wolf children actually grew up and had children. The children turned out to be like normal human, as it were. They didn't have
human babies have to be suckled for much longer than wolf cubs, so it wouldn't work.
No,
they'd die. Now there have been feral children that have been abandoned for whatever reason, not babies, but older ones that have lived with wolves or with wild dogs. There's one famous one, I think, from Italy, of a guy living. His parents were dead, and he lived with an old man in the woods when the man died, he just went feral, and I think there's a documentary about him. And he said he could approach wolves and bears and stuff, and they wouldn't attack him, and he lived off the land. And he wasn't found until he was, I think it's something like 14.
Oh, right. So I did read a story about feral children out in it's in Australia, where I think there was 3 children, and when they were found almost like 12, 13 years later, they turned out to be more because there'd been inbreeding between them. But somehow they'd actually managed somehow to survive just off the land alone. And I saw that as a documentary, and that was pretty remarkable. And one of those actually had an abundance of hair on the body, one of the lands did. And I'm sure that they said that there was always wolves and like animals around them. It's interesting how do animals really co-opt humans? Is that kind of a regular thing that happens in the wild when there's someone who's...
There have been cases where apes have stolen human babies and attempted to suckle human babies.
So I wonder how often that actually happens. I mean, because there was the whole thing what happened with Harambe, the ape that was at the New York Zoo, when someone had thrown a child in there, or the child had dropped in, and the ape came to pick up the child, and unfortunately they didn't know what action to take other than to shoot it. But I can't.
Well, they were Americans, so of course they shot him. They love killing animals. They love guns, and they love killing animals. Similar things have happened in other zoos. A very similar thing happened in Jersey Zoo. A kid fell off the wall into the gorilla enclosure, and the male gorilla there just went over and protected him and stayed with him. That's happened a couple of times. There's another zoo. I think it happened at either Howlett's or Port Lim as well. So almost exactly the same scenario. But because this is England and not America, the gorilla wasn't murdered by gun-worshipping nutcases.
So do you think they would have just whipped out the old tranquilizer guns and just neutralized them and then collected the child afterwards? I guess, yeah, and America does have a panic first option, which is if we've got guns, we use them straight away. It's incredible to think we talk the same language, and we're a completely different culture entirely, and guns are much more abundant over there. So what do you think is going to happen? So if we find a creature, say like the Almasty, or we find orang pendek, what is the first option to protect them? What will happen to them?
I think it depends on where they're found. I hope that they will have full protection, because the world's attention will be on that area. So hopefully the politicians will realise it's in their favour that the animal is protected. And if it's something spectacular like a Yeti or an Almasty or something like that, it could have the cultural significance of, say, the panda does in China. So hopefully they'll be protected. They'll get full protection.
Because that's true. They didn't actually believe the panda existed, did they? They didn't believe there was a black and white panda for 100 years or something crazy until they eventually found it.
It was, I think it was Theodore Roosevelt's son that tracked down a hibernating panda and then very bravely shot it to death while it was asleep.
Of course, the Americans and their guns.
Yeah, and that was the first panda.
Yeah, because they didn't believe they existed, did they?
They didn't believe gorillas existed.
No, and that's crazy, isn't it? So,
or giant squid.
No, yeah, there was a lot of resistance on the giant squid for.
Well, there was a guy called Pierre de Montfort who was around in the late 18th century, and he was a biologist, and he specialised in mollusks, and he wrote lots of books on mollusks and the study of mollusks and seashells and things like that. And he was very well respected, and he worked with the Natural History Museum and the Botanical Gardens, and he went off on expeditions gathering specimens as far afield as Egypt. And then he got talking to some whalers from Nantucket who had settled in Paris, and they told him stories about finding great sucker marks on the hides of sperm whales that they had captured, and dying sperm whales vomiting up these great tentacles 40, 50 feet long. And he came to the conclusion that there were giant squid, and those creatures were probably behind the legends of the Kraken. So he wrote this book on giant squid, And because of that, in France, he became a complete pariah. He lost his job. He couldn't be employed anywhere else. He was reduced to selling seashells for a living. And this great respected man ended up dying of starvation in a Parisian gutter in 1820. In the 1850s, the first giant squid was actually captured. He's been right all along, but he's never been given the credit for it.
It's awful. I guess that's happened throughout history, hasn't it? The most obvious and the truth is there, but no one ever believes them at face value.
One of my missions in life is the the rehabilitation and recognition of Pierre de Montfort.
So is that something that can be done like the blue? What do we have? We have them blue markers on buildings, don't we? To recognise them. Do you think there's something similar to that in France?
Well, they should do something similar to that. And I don't even know what he looks like. I don't know even know if there's a drawing of him. This man.
Oh.
But he wrote masses of books, and it's high time he was recognised.
Yeah, what do they call it? The Blue Plaque program. That's it. That's what they call it. There's quite a few around Nottingham, like J.M. Barrie and so on. Yeah, so I wonder if there's something similar to that. I wonder if a campaign can be created via the cryptozoological fan community and the supporters, perhaps, to get something like that done. As an option for you for 2021.
Maybe a permanent display in the Paris Natural History Museum.
That sounds doable. I don't know anyone who works at France's Natural History Museum at all. Otherwise, it's a case of just fire off some emails and go, "Hey, what's going on? Do we know what this guy did and talked about? Is his books secured?" I guess it would be to republish them, perhaps. Would that be the correct moving forward?
Yeah, and the one on the giant squid, I'd love to see it republished, and I'd love to see an English translation of it as well.
So I guess it'd be Old French as well, wouldn't it? Or older French. So yeah, you have to be brought up to modern French and then brought over to English, I guess. Yeah. That sounds like a task and a half. I think.
Well, that's one of the things I'm really interested in is lost cryptozoological works and cryptozoological works that aren't in English and getting them translated. Boris Prozhnev, who I mentioned earlier, he was a Russian scientist, very well respected in Russia, not so well known in the rest of the world. But he dabbled in all sorts of fields, history, biology, all sorts of things. And he was an ardent supporter of the Almasty, the wild man, and he wrote a book called The Problem of the Relict Hominoids. And he wrote it in the early 70s. And only ever about 130 copies were ever made. And it was never translated into English. I tried to get a copy from the Moscow library, and they wouldn't send it abroad. But I managed to track down his great nephew, who had got a copy of the original book. So the CFZ Press have now had it translated, and it's just about to come out imminently, and we call it the Soviet Sasquatch. And it contains masses of stuff that's never been seen in the West before, that the Snowman Commission found out from the various travels and interviews and stuff. This stuff has never before been seen in the West.
That's fantastic. I mean, they're the things that really interest me, I guess. Even Philip Mantle's work with Flying Disc Press. Of course, he's into ufology and the history of that. But he's spent like a lifetime now getting reports from other countries and then translating them to English. And I think that's the most important thing, is get them to the biggest audience they could possibly be seen by. And when I hear stories of cryptozoology and stories of creatures around the world that have government reports investigating them, that's the stuff that gives it credibility in a way that nothing else can.
We've just got our hands on an unpublished book by a lady called Odette. What's her second name? Odette Cherine, and she was half Russian. She was English, and she wrote in English, and she wrote a couple of books on relic hominins, the Snowman Company and the Yeti, they're called. But she wrote this third one that's never been published, and she wrote it in the early 80s, and we've just got hold of it, and we're going to be reprinting it. Well, printing it for the first time, because it was never ever printed.
So, are you going to publish the Russian version to publish over there as well?
Oh no, she didn't write in Russian. She wrote in English. But this particular book was never published. It's one of her lost works.
So that's going to be
the Boris Krushev book is the one that was in Russian. Okay. That's just about to come out. This one will be out later in the year. This one by Odette.
Oh, that's incredible, actually, to find books like that that are perhaps doing researched or in progress, or she never thought there was enough in it, so she was going to add more to it, and then life, of course, takes over. So it's great that stuff like that actually gets to happen. So I guess does her family are they aware of that?
I don't know if she has any living family.
Oh no. So I guess that would be a bit of a coup for a foreword of some kind. Are you writing the foreword for the book?
I don't know yet. Maybe. We've not long had it. I'm still reading. I'm still working my way through it. We've got the book by Damon Corrie, the Arawak Indian chief. That's coming out next. And then this book by Odette Cherine is probably going to be, late this year, early next year.
So you've got a bit of a roadmap plan, then, have you?
Yeah.
All right, excellent. So if you wanted to leave your website name and address or places where people can get in contact with you, would you mind shouting them out?
Yeah, the website is www.cfz.org.uk. That's www.cfz.org.uk. My email, which has changed recently, is now doctor3uk@yahoo.com. That's doctor written as a complete word, all lowercase, then 3 as the number rather than letters. So doctor3uk@yahoo.com.
Excellent. Okay, cool. Can people find you on social media and so on? I know you have a YouTube channel, don't you, with some videos on there?
Yeah, if you just put Centre for Fortean Zoology or CFZ TV into YouTube search, you'll get it.
Excellent. And I guess people can find you on Facebook and Twitter and all those usual places.
Facebook, yeah. I very rarely use Twitter.
Yeah. And you do, it's interesting, people do use Facebook and Twitter very differently, although most people just tend to post the same thing in both places. Yeah, I'm not sure I like Twitter. I use it, manage to keep in contact with certain people, but Facebook generally is where most people find me. But no, Richard, thank you very much for spending some time with me tonight. It's been good to actually talk to someone after being in hospital for so long, and I feel like I'm alive again.
No worries.
Man, so you've obviously got a lot coming up, so I'm gonna look forward to see what you're going to be publishing. I'm certainly going to look forward to getting some of those books and having a read through some stuff. I mean, my time in hospital, I managed to get through like so many books. It was crazy. I managed to read I read Steve Mirror's Phenomena magazine in one go. I've never done that ever. I got to read it all in one go, and I'm sure there was something in there from you on that one.
God, over lockdown, I've read a heap of novels. Actually, most of them really good.
Yeah, it's been good to actually read stuff. I always kind of slow down a little bit, so that's been really interesting. So,
if you want a good, really creepy ghost novel that is full of Fortean references and Fortean Easter eggs, read Apparition Phase by Will McLean. It's absolutely brilliant. It's got references to Jeff the Talking Mongoose, Doctor Who, the Philip experiment, all kinds of ghost photographs. It's like a Fortean smorgasbord, but it's a really, really creepy. It's a really creepy little novel. It's about two very clever twins, a boy and a girl, and they decide when they get hold of a camera, they're going to fake a ghost photograph. And they go through all the different famous ghost photographs, and they decide on the one that looks the scariest is the monk with no face. You know, the big towering monk who's by the altar in that church in Yorkshire. So they try and recreate that and show it to their classmates, and it's about what happens afterwards.
Ah, interesting stuff. Interesting.
And it's really creepy.
Just want to give that a book a shout out again. What was the name of that?
Apparition Phase by Will McLean.
Okay, there we go. Apparition Phase by Will McLean. Okay, so that's going to go into my search bar in just a moment. I should be having a look at that. That's really good. Richard, I want to say thank you, man. I really appreciate the opportunity we've had a chance to have a chat tonight. And just to catch up, it's been so long, so it's been really good.
Yeah.
So thank you very much for that. I'm going to hit the old stop.
If you can make it up to Whitby or down to London in November,
yeah,
we can have a pint or two.
I'm sure I can. So let's just. Do you want to give me those dates? I'll put them in my diary. And
the London Cryptozoology Club. That is on November the 13th.
So
I mean, I can Facebook you the details.
Oh, sure, okay.
And then Winter Ghosts, which is the British Folk Horror Revival convention.
That's up in Whitby, isn't it?
Yeah, that's the 27th and the 28th of November.
All right, let's just. But yeah, so on that topic of big cats, then. So there's been a lot of big cats, hasn't there? I mean, it keeps popping up in the news. I mean, I think I've seen so much stuff in the Metro about big cats in the last year or so than I've ever seen in my life.
Oh Christ! The documentary, that British Big Cats documentary, was absolutely great. They got in Gloucestershire, they've got a camera trap that takes a photograph of this cat, and a tracker from South Africa who's familiar with big cats says, "Well, that looks like a puma to me." They've had tracks identified. They've had the bite marks in bones, because big cats have a very distinctive bite mark with the carnassial teeth, the shearing teeth at the back.
Yeah.
They leave like 3 puncture wounds. They call them bone pits in the bone, and they were done by a guy from the Royal Agricultural Society, and saying, "Yeah, this is big cat."
Oh man! So how many of these cats do you think there actually are in the British countryside?
Oh, that's the question. Nobody really knows.
Because no one's.
I mean, there have been sightings of them for years and years and years. So either they are being released on a regular basis, or they're breeding.
Sure. I mean, I'm assuming these are the remnants of the zoo animals, aren't they? That got released in the 80s.
Well, up until the mid-70s, you could, buy any animal you want. You could buy any animal you want, and any old duffer, if they had the money and the space, could start a zoo. You didn't have to have any qualifications or experience. Harrods had a pet department that sold lions and even a gorilla.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, and some kid got chomped in London, so they brought in the Dangerous Wild Animals Act. I think it's 76, I think, or 77. And then they said you had to provide proof you could keep these animals securely, and you've got to have proof that they couldn't get out and attack anybody, and you've got to pay a hefty license fee, and a load of people just let them go. I mean, in the documentary, there's film of this guy being interviewed and just admitted to letting them go.
Oh yeah. So, do you think they just ended up in the woodland? I mean, there was that quite famous gorilla bound by the canal in like the late 70s in Manchester. I know that was one of the released gorillas. It was like the beast.
I've never heard of gorillas being released anywhere.
It was a single one. It actually was a Fortean Time story. Actually, I read on that. It was called like the Beast of something Canal, and it was like the canal began with a B, and that was in Manchester, and that was always put down to being a released ape of some kind. But yeah, the cats have almost they're managing to maintain their population, aren't they? I guess they're breeding well.
Well, they have a massive population of deers, rabbits, and other things to prey on, and they've got no competition.
No, so they're just going to keep going. I guess it's only a matter of time before there actually is an attack on a human, and I guess that's when the media will go into a new frenzy.
There have been alleged attacks on people. One woman said she'd gone through the graveyard where her and her husband had put out some bait, and they come back to check on it, and she trod on a panther's tail, and it leapt up and scratched her stomach. Well, I don't think you could get close enough to a panther without it noticing you. So I think that story is nonsense.
Yeah, I get that.
And the wounds didn't look severe enough. Then there was a lad, I think his name was Josh Trellick or something. He was a Welsh lad. He said he'd come across a panther and it had reared up and scratched his face. And once again, if a panther had slashed his face with his claws, the wound would have been much more secure. So it's much more severe. I mean.
Yeah, because it's designed, the claws, of course, is to tear. So it's going to cut into the flesh deep and hard, and then rip out because it's a panther or a cheetah or whatever.
Thus far, I've been unconvinced by any of the alleged attacks on humans.